You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. This episode is brought to you by Kingswaysoft. Kingswaysoft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 80 countries and regions rely on Kingswaysoft to integrate data with various business applications in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage their information assets. This episode is also brought to you by MSCRMaddons.com. With focus on productivity and usability, MSCRMaddons.com is a leading provider of high-quality add-on solutions for Dynamics 365. Whether it's need for professional documents generated and processed in a single click, keeping your storage costs under control by moving documents to SharePoint or Azure Blob, or simplifying your users' daily tasks by improved navigation and activity handling, MSCRMaddons.com add-ons will help you drive efficiency and user experience. We thank Kingswaysoft and MSCRMaddons.com for sponsoring ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. Welcome to ProdCast. How are you doing today, Matthew?
Joel, I am being productively cold today. Very, very productively cold.
Okay. Well, here's a question. Do you consider yourself an autodidact?
Ooh, an autodidact. I'm going to have to consult the Wikipedia or free dictionary to figure this one out. Remind me what you mean by that.
Okay, so I've read some books by Nassim Taleb, such as The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. He's fairly well known, but basically it's kind of I don't know if it's behavioral science or I don't know what or economics. He's basically a former trader and is applying things like optionality to other areas of life. And it's interesting, like how to be prepared for a black swan event, like some random thing or some extreme event. But he talks about he considers himself an autodidact, and in a lot of what I do and what I try to, I don't know if I can say I am an autodidact, but I think it's one of the things I strive to be, which is someone who is a lifelong learner, who is continually learning and self-taught. And so I put together some thoughts around why we should strive to be an autodidact and some tips I've found and things I find successful. And again, I can't say if I'm the most successful at being this, but it's what I'm striving to be. Yeah, and so
that definitely helps out. Now I'm picking up what you're laying down. So let's
and you'll sound smarter if you say I'm an autodidact.
Either that or you sound pretentious.
Yeah, it depends what voice you use when you do it. One thing is, read a variety of literature. I've talked about that before. Don't get stuck in a rut. He's got a rule that I kind of like, which is only read books that are 5 to 10 years old or older, because there's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of business books, especially, that are churned out, repeating themselves, people who haven't really done anything but are writing books about it. And you really want to find books that have stood the test of time. And if you have a book that's 5 to 10 years old, you can read, look at recent reviews and see, if it's still as timely, or read the first chapter or something like that. Also, I find things go in waves. And one of the things that has got me a little bit concerned with social media, it seems like it gets everybody in groupthink. Like everybody's thinking about this topic this week and everybody's thinking about that topic this week. And I think it opens up a possibility of being manipulated in some ways. And so I like to find things that are a little bit more timeless, and also that the just practical side of it. You can usually get an older book from the library, so you don't have to always buy them, or find a good used copy and don't have to pay $25 for a book. So there's a practical reason for that, but more than that, and then setting yourself a deadline. So I don't like to spend more than 3 to 5 days on a book. If I need to spend longer than that, usually I get bored with it. Mm-hmm. So the thing I've found is things that I learn because I want to learn are much more valuable than things I've had to learn. Like when I was a student in college, or something I have to read assigned to me by my boss. I don't remember much from that, but there's a lot of books that I've read or courses I've taken online because I wanted to learn that subject that I seem to absorb it more when it's something that I'm interested in rather than something I have to do.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, hearing that last bit of it there. It kind of reminds me, I think we've talked about it on ProdCast before, but the idea of the kind of having identity-based goals and it being something that comes from within, and it's something that, like, at your core, you actually care about the type of person that it makes you. And I think both, as far as choosing the topic that you want to learn, as well as getting that drive to do it quickly, I think that definitely helps.
Right.
Now, I was going to say, before you jump there, Joel, I'm curious, what is your favorite book that's greater than 10 years old that's not The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that we've talked about several times?
Well, I think I would have to look at the dates because I don't know exactly what years certain books were read. I'll get back to you later in the podcast. I need to look up my recently read books to use on. There's a lot of good ones. But what about on the topic of a list? So I think lists can be helpful when you get started, but a list can also be bad. And I'll tell you what I mean. I like the serendipity of being able to make connections and go in unexpected paths. So if you're interested in a topic and you have you look and see what are the list of best books on this topic, and you start reading that book, one of the books will recommend or like quote another author, and I like having the spontaneity to discover and go deeper that way. And I find those kind of pathways will be more valuable than what an artificial list might be. I think lists are helpful when you get started, but I think once you get going, I don't necessarily approach it with a list, once I get into it.
Sure. Yeah, and I think I feel I'm the same way. The lists are good idea generators, but I'd much rather hear a recommendation than just go and try to pour my way through a specific list of the 5 best books on fill in the blank.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, why should you be an autodidact? So I kind of jumped to the how, but we want to start with the why here, right? So one of the things that kind of drove me was a couple of years ago, I just felt like, other than what I do for my job and some current popular culture topics, I didn't really have a lot to talk about. You'd get together with friends from, people from work or friends, and the topics the conversation is kind of shallow. And I just felt I want to be able to have more to add and contribute to the conversation than just these surface type topics. And I want to be able to go out to lunch with my coworkers and talk about something other than CRM.
Sure.
And I wanted to make connections, because as you get older, I feel, and it's not just old people, but I feel there's an easy way out, which is to look at the world through whatever your particular lens is, politically, spiritually, philosophically, whatever your default position is. But it's a much bigger world than that. And by making those connections, I think you can really keep yourself grounded, because there's nothing that's more frustrating to me than having a conversation with somebody who thinks they have the answer to everything, and they demonstrate their ignorance through that process. And I think if you really do learn and grow, it's humbling, because you know how much you don't know. And especially if you get beyond the surface pop psychology, pop business books, and go a little bit deeper, read some challenging science or math books a little bit above your level, stretch yourself. You might not understand, like the Nassim Taleb books, they're pretty deep. I mean, he gets deep into philosophy and science and mathematical functions beyond my capabilities, but by reading it, I grow a little bit in that area.
Very cool.
So definitely, looking at, and if you have friends who are stronger in one area or deeper in one area, then you can start with them. If you're on Goodreads, look at the books they've been reading, make those connections. So, I mean, some other books that I've read recently, and I don't know if they hit the 10-year mark or not. One recent one that I read is The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less by Barry Schwartz. Mm-hmm. And it's all about choices and the interesting parallel of how no choice is tyranny. Too many choices is also tyranny. And so you look at the store shelf that have 50 different flavors of Oreos. There's a lot of anxiety that comes, and I think for children, a lot of that is kids have a lot of options of, what do you want to, which of these movies do you want to watch, or what do you want to do? And as you get older, that's a lot of anxiety. And so showing how choices within limits, and by actually intentionally, I don't want other people or the government limiting my choices, but I can choose to limit my choices in certain areas to basically have a more peaceful, happy life, for example.
Yeah, and I totally identify and agree with that one. I mean, it's the Trader Joe's principle, right? Of they certainly don't have five different varieties of everything, and in fact, it's that lack of choice that makes you almost more susceptible to try out something new or interesting, which is kind of that limitation that's helping to drive that. And for me, even looking at that across other aspects of the day, right? Again, something I think we've talked about before on this very podcast is around some of the times that choice isn't necessarily a good thing. It can be the anti-hero of productivity. What are you going to have for breakfast in the morning? What are you going to wear in the morning? And stacking up all those choices that you have to make early can have an impact on your discipline and grit throughout the day. So, kind of applying that same principle of simplicity to something like, what are you going to invest your time and learnings into in your autodidactation? I don't know what how to operationalize that term, but
yeah, and things like, Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day, basically, not the same set of clothes, but basically the same outfit every day. I've gone to eating the same thing for breakfast every day, just because it's one less thing I need to think about. And as long as I have that thing in my house, I'm set.
Yeah. I do a similar thing, but I'll admit here that I only have the same thing about 6 out of every 7 days, because I feel like if I eat the same thing 7 days in a row, I'm both too boring and going to get sick of it more quickly. And that little out of having something a little bit up in the air helps me out, so I don't just fall into a rut.
Right. Okay. I'll give you another example of recently within the last year, I read for the first time Homer's Odyssey and Homer's Iliad. Oh. And I learned a lot from that. I learned I really liked the Odyssey, and I really didn't like the Iliad.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, did you meet each of those within your target only want to be reading a book for a few days?
Yeah, I did. I did, actually. And part of it is, if you want to read really old books, get a good translation. Don't buy the 99-cent special, because it's probably not a good translation. But you can look at reviews and see what's the best translation, and that will help you do it a lot faster.
Excellent.
And basically, the Odyssey is an awesome adventure story. The Iliad is a Greek god soap opera. That's the best I can explain it.
Fair enough.
And don't be afraid to abandon it, too. I actually read all but the very last chapter of the Iliad. And I don't know if the Iliad really has chapters, but this translation does. In the past, we talked about how when you do your planning, you build in a fudge ratio, kind of like your personal project planning, when you're estimating how much time you need to dedicate to something. So let's dig into that a little bit more. What do you do? How do you determine how much allowance you should build for unknowns and for fudge ratio? Nope.
Yep. So I think the first thing I have to do before I jump into that is make a bit of an admission here, and that I feel a little bit like I've fallen out of touch with my fudge ratio. So where I start is using this to be able to estimate how long I think it'll take me to do things, and by extension of that, how long I think it'll take other people to do things. So as an example, before I've formulated any kind of formal, project plan, but I know there's this thing that we need to accomplish as a group, I will try to come up with that high level building block in my head of how long these things are going to take. And part of that is knowing myself and how long I think it would take me. Part of it is knowing the team that I'm working with and how long I think it would take any of them to be able to do their piece and what that is relative to me for different types of activities. Sometimes they're going to be faster, sometimes they're going to be slower. And in almost all cases, because we're all guilty of this, we always personally think we can do something faster than we really can. So, that's where knowing yourself and even having a fudge factor or fudge ratio for yourself is important. So like I said, I feel like I've fallen out of touch with this personally. And what I am really looking at doing is kind of reestablishing that baseline for myself. And for me, what that entails is a few different things. One is to set a baseline of what are the things that I'm doing within a week, specifically, kind of back to that 168 hours concept that I've blogged about before, but really being able to put those estimates in kind of a more firm plan around what they are. Not just the writing in the calendar of what the plan's going to be, but specifically, what is my plan for that time? And then being very diligent in using the other tools that I have, Manic Time, Dailyo, and so forth, to be able to look at that over the course of a couple of weeks of where am I actually coming in.
So are you talking professional work stuff? Are you talking personal stuff? Or both, or what?
It's a fair question. The answer is both for that one, because there are some aspects that I've found in the fudge ratio that are kind of universal in being able to apply that fudge factor or fudge ratio to it, if you will, and it's even things like being able to underestimate how long something like going and running an errand is going to be, or how long going to a Gopher football game, Go Gophers, is going to take for me, and just kind of what that actually entails. And, there are some of those things where the more often you do it, and this is true both in personal as well as in business, the more often you do a thing, the more accurate you can be in that initial mental estimate. And there's even a range of fudge ratios that may be out there for different types of tasks. One where I personally have a much larger fudge ratio, or at least have in the past, is around all of the polish type of work that I'll put into a demonstration that I'm doing for a sales pursuit that I'm in. I know the big building blocks that are actually required. One of them is that fit and finish type of polish, and I consistently underestimate how much I'm going to put into that. And that's one where I really struggle in being able to help estimate and communicate with others on a team if we're building it together on that specific piece of it, because I know that my personal barometer on some of that can get really out of whack.
Yeah, and I think for me it's estimating, and you as well, it's when it's something you're really good at but somebody else is going to be doing it, that's a dependency on it. That's where I struggle sometimes, is doing that. In the personal life, I'm better at it with work related stuff because I'm in that mode, but when I'm at home, I'm frequently not very good at it. I frequently try and cram too much stuff or think a certain task is going to take less time, not thinking of all the preparation time and everything, that's going to need to happen. And especially when there's other people, kids especially, you can probably double any estimate.
Yeah, absolutely there. And it's funny on that side of it is trying to work those specific ones in where there's one type of task where it's just me and I'm either going to do it all myself or I'm going to have a specific shared aspect with another person or completely delegate it. The kids give an example there that it happens in the workplace as well, but where you have almost a codependency on each other for that thing that you're going to do. The kid stuff is a really great example of where that's very consistent in the type of tasks that I'm trying to estimate anyway.
Right. And this is, ancillary related to this, but one thing that I have made myself a new rule that I'm trying to follow, that I haven't been extremely successful at, but I want this to be my rule, is no more back-to-back tasks, or as little as possible, meaning planning. If I plan to do things, if say I've got a 5-hour block and I plan 5 separate things that all butt up right to each other, it's gonna fail, or one's gonna run over, something's gonna happen. So I'm trying to set myself a little bit of fudge factor there as well.
Sure.
So that you got time to get a bio break, get a drink of water, talk to your coworker once a day or something like that.
Give yourself the excuse to take a shower too.
Exactly. Put some clothes on.
Well, so the other thing of part of why this is important for me is, as I think about trying to estimate these tasks in some sort of grander plan, in my ability to delegate things to others, if I am more in tune and accurate and confident in my scheduling or estimation of what those fudge ratios are going to be, I find that it's easier to delegate the things that should be and are more easily delegable. So I'll give the example of the flip side of that. If I've done a poor job of estimating that, or I'm not confident in my estimate of that for somebody else, I will too easily just kind of wet noodle over and take it on myself to do the task, even if it is something that shouldn't really be on my plate for that. And by having a good, solid, defendable, well-trodden fudge ratio in how I put those estimates together, then I'm personally more confident in being able to delegate things and accomplish more as an overall team.
Right, and if you don't build in enough time for that, I've found I spend most of my time in reactive mode there, where I don't have the time to really plan and act. I'm reacting, and you're living with a constant sense of urgency because you feel like you've got to rush to get things done. Yeah. So that's why I think I used to say one of my goals was to work with a sense of urgency, and I still want to give my customers 100% when I'm focused on their work. But I've modified that to work with a sense of urgency and sustainability. Like we talk about environmental sustainability, meaning, don't work in a way that destroys the environment. Same thing, you got to work in a way that's sustainable, that you can keep up over time. And that's where I think having enough time estimated to do tasks, do it well, and do it at a pace that you can keep the pace up and still enjoy your work and not feel like you're pulling all your hair out, that's where we want to be.
Yeah.
And accepting the fact that means, as a trade-off, I might, in the short term, feel like I'm getting less done. Like I maybe feel like, I'm not being I could squeeze another, 3 things in the day. But then the quality of the other things I'm working on would suffer.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, it's important to call out that the measuring, the establishing of the baseline for the fudge ratio and revisiting it, your accuracy in that itself is not the measure of success. The measure of success is being able to take those learnings, those failings along the way, and being able to apply that to the better, brighter future that you're going to have in being able to more consistently put those estimates together, put those high-level plans together in the future. So, when looking at kind of where the failure can be in some of that process, the keeping the correct end goal and what's important to fail on of setting that baseline and finding that number is not to be confused with the potential failure of an overall project going sideways because you've failed to put in the hard work in those earlier failings.
Right, absolutely. And you get more skin in the game, if that makes sense. You get more ownership over the task that way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we talked about why and how you should be an autodidact. We talked about fudge factors and estimating time to complete a task. I'm good with that, but what's this thing you put on the agenda about paper towel dispensers?
I'll call this a ProdCast mini. But
okay.
I learned something about paper towel dispensers, like the automatic kind. You wave your hand in front of it, the paper towel comes out, and you see them all over the place, right?
Right.
So you can save yourself an average of about 1 second every time you use an automatic paper towel dispenser by, after you wave your hand in front of it and a little bit has come out, just tear that paper towel off before the machine has even stopped. It will automatically stop. I have never I was really surprised. It automatically stops. You get a good clean tear. You still have enough paper towel to be able to dry your hand, and you're saving time every single time you use that paper towel dispenser.
Okay,
so.
Now, since we're talking about paper towel dispensers, and I can't believe we're doing a podcast about paper towel dispensers, but I've had numerous colleagues who, I don't know what their expertise on paper towel dispensers are, but there's a strain of thought that says you're supposed to, after you dry your hands, wave your hand in front of it to get the towel to come out for the next guy. That way, while his hands are wet, he doesn't have to you're being courteous and paying it forward, if that makes sense. And then that person is supposed to do the same thing. Do you buy into that?
I've never heard of this. I mean, I've certainly walked into a restroom or a similar facility and had a paper towel waiting for me there. I'm always a little bit suspect of those paper towels that have been hanging out for who knows how long, who knows what's been going on nearby that thing. So I'm not.
No, that's because somebody of the pay it forward paper towel cult has just been in the bathroom and is paying it forward for you.
I don't like that. I mean, I don't even like it when I walk a little bit too close to the paper towel thing and it comes out before I've washed my hands, but I just happen to walk by it.
Right.
I mean, at that point, it's not like I'm going to throw that towel away and get myself a fresh one. I'll still use the thing.
You might get an extra one and not use the part that was hanging out.
Yeah. Well, and also, who needs it paid forward that they're not able to wave a hand in front of the paper towel dispenser? I mean, if that is the mitigating factor, they're going to struggle to be able to get that paper towel that's been pre-dispersed for them. I do not like this. I do not like it. Joel, I do not like paper towels and something that rhymes.
All right, so we would love to hear your feedback about paper towel dispensing. I would love to get lots of comments about that, just to see, am I crazy, or has anybody else heard this theory that you should pay it forward with the paper towels?
I can already see at the top of this podcast when it drops, it's just a picture of somebody at a paper towel dispenser.
Absolutely. So start reading, become an autodidact, and build in some fudge factor.
Sounds good. I'll stay productive with that.
All right, thanks. This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. Follow Matthew on Twitter at @MCAnderson or on his blog, connectingthedata.com. Follow Joel Lindstrom on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. ProdCast and the rest of the CRM Audio Network are available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and anywhere else fine podcasts are available. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts LLC.